Eli Drinkwitz' $4 million question this offseason is one that could shape Missouri football for years to come.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And on today's program, I'm going to put on my sports czar hat and attempt to save college football. I think you're really going to love one idea I have in particular. Also, Eli Drinkwitz says, don't expect very many opt-outs from this Mizzou football team in the Gator Bowl. So this is shaping up to be a potentially interesting game here at the end of the month. Before I start the program, I should say, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. And I got to say, you look into and start digging into the details of Eli Drinkwitz's contract. I'll talk about his buyout later in the program. But to me, the biggest news in there is a 33% increase for compensation for assistant coaches, football-specific staff members, and the football strength staff as well. So going up from what was a $12 million base for those assistants and other staff members, all the way up to $16 million. So to me, that extra $4 million that Eli Drinkwitz ostensibly has to play with this offseason, well, that could really go a long way for Missouri. And I'll tell you this, they aren't just going to be handing out contract extensions with that $4 million either. There could definitely be some changes made, particularly on the offensive and special team staff, one would think. So to me, whatever Eli Drinkwitz decides to do there could really shape the future of this program. I think next year in particular is just such a massive year for Missouri football. Of course, once to 2027, my goodness, the schedule gets almost shockingly brutal in its difficulty. Of course, every season in the SEC is going to be tough, but of course, next season, well, begins the 9-game era of SEC scheduling. Fortunately for Missouri, in the opening year of its centennial project, the North End Zone project, well, next year, Missouri going to get 5 SEC home games versus 4 on the road and a relatively navigable slate. So if Missouri's going to take advantage of that next season, they need to be on its best possible version of itself offensively. Missouri's got to be better in the passing game in particular, whether that means bringing in new people and new ideas. Something's got to change, that's for certain. And that $4 million is earmarked, by the way, specifically for that purpose. And it's not as though that money is going to stop anyone outside of the Missouri program, the NIL donors, from putting big money at a quarterback, for example, if indeed that's where Missouri decides they're going to go. But regardless, to me, that's probably the most interesting thing to watch this offseason, other than, of course, how Missouri handles the transfer portal and what players specifically the Tigers get. But $4 million, even in the SEC, that's going to go a long, long way if Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz want it to. And on the Gator Bowl coming up against Virginia on December 27th, well, Eli Drinkwitz expecting Missouri to mostly be at full strength. In fact, he thinks the senior class in particular wants to go out on a high note. And he's also points out, though, that underclassmen are going to be getting back some NFL evaluations here in the coming days. So depending on those evaluations, that could affect, I would think, perhaps Zion Young, perhaps Damon Wilson, maybe perhaps Caden Green as well. That seems like more of a long shot to me. Really, other than that, I think that there's certainly a chance that some other guys have an NFL future, at least being picked and all that kind of stuff. I just don't see somebody in the Armand Mimbu type of space where he's a top 10 kind of pick and, well, they're definitely going to sit out. That seems unlikely. And really, if you look at it last season, Luther Burden ends up going in the second round of the draft, much to my surprise, at least this time last season. I was definitely skeptical of that. I thought this time last year, December 2024, I definitely thought Luther Burden was a first-round pick. And I think, well, him and his people did too. He ends up sitting out the bowl game, and he goes in the second round. I don't think those two things are correlated by any means. But I do think if Burden had realized maybe that he was more likely to go early second round versus mid-early first, like a lot of people had been speculating, maybe he would have played in the game. So I just think that even somebody like Damon Wilson, I've seen him mocked at, say, 25th overall. That's still the back end of the first round. Again, that's where Luther Burden was being mocked about this time last year too. So if you're Damon Wilson, if you're Zion Young, if you're just on the cusp of maybe being a first-round type of talent, maybe it's better to solidify that by playing in the bowl game. I think a lot of NFL teams like to see guys who, frankly, like to play football. And unless you're a surefire top 5, top 10 type of player, well, there's still good reason to want to go out and perform well, I think, in a bowl game for 99% of players. And as I dug even more deeply into the contract details here for Eli Drinkwitz on his extension, well, it's pretty obvious why he would want to stay at Missouri, because Missouri seemingly gave Drinkwitz everything he could have possibly wanted, at least as far as I can tell. Not only a little bit of a jump in his own annual salary, but also, as I pointed out, a 33% $4 million increase on his annual budget for assistants and staff members for football, but also a massive buyout as well on top of it. If Missouri fires Drinkwitz before December 1st next year, by the way, well, they'll owe him $44 million. Year after that, it goes down to 36, then 27, then 18, then 10, all the way down to $1 million in 2031. Now, of course, if Eli Drinkwitz is still around in 2031, you can bet your bottom dollar there will probably be 3 or 4 more contract extensions by then. That just seems, for better or worse, that just seems to be how these things work. And then you dig in even further into this contract. I thought this was really interesting because there are no specific dollar amounts or guarantees for name, image, and likeness or anything like that. But there is a pretty long paragraph of legalese here saying, among other things, quote, "The university shall continue to make consistent efforts to provide nationally competitive resources to support the football program, including for player retention and acquisition." There's a whole bunch of more language here, and for each contract year during the term, the university shall equip the program with economic resources, including funds for name, image, and likeness opportunities, revenue sharing initiatives, and or related funding. So basically, long story short here, without actually putting any numbers down, because, well, frankly, the university can't do that, and in reality, that money's coming from outside of the university, from donors that do not. The revenue sharing money that is now part of all this, well, that comes from the university. The rest of it, though, well, Mizzou fans who are the big donors, get used to donating some more money if you want to keep winning football games. And if you want to keep Eli Drinkwitz happy, and if you want to keep, apparently, Missouri living up to the standards of its contract. I just think, I'm no lawyer, as I said yesterday when talking about the Damon Wilson situation. It just seems like that language in here about, hey, they'll do the best they can to, push the boundaries on NIL and all this stuff. I just wonder how enforceable all of this really is. But obviously the purpose here is just to make Eli Drinkwitz feel all warm and fuzzy inside about staying at Missouri. So hopefully that relationship continues to be just that, warm and fuzzy. And overall, I agree with Eli Drinkwitz's assessment of the Mizzou football season, that it was a good season, not a great season. And if that's disappointing to Missouri fans, I'll just speak for myself. It's only because I think the Missouri passing game let down what was a really, really good roster. And I'll tell you this, 4 SEC first team all conference players for Mizzou this season. I think that goes a long way to proving that point. So let's talk about those young men. And also, by the way, if Notre Dame, if this situation causes them to think, hey, maybe we're going to join a conference, this isn't a prediction whatsoever. But don't be shocked if it's the SEC. I'm being serious, folks, and I'll explain exactly what I'm talking about coming up here on the program in just a little bit. But you know what? First, it is time to talk about FanDuel, because NFL Sundays always move fast. One big play, and suddenly the entire game feels different. Well, that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And you know what? I'm also going to bet on the other type of football as well. Give me Real Madrid today in the UCL against Man City. And if you want to be right in the action, whether it is world football or American football, visit FanDuel.com and you can place your NFL live bets all season long. It is FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. And thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Mizzou with no interruptions, member-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonmizzou.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. And yes, Missouri with 4 first-team All-SEC players, at least according to the coaches. Ahmad Hardy, Keagen Trost, the Missouri right tackle, Zion Young, and Josiah Trotter. So all of those guys, obviously, in my opinion, very deserving. Second teamers, by the way, Caden Green and Damon Wilson as well. So back this previous offseason, when Eli Drinkwitz said, hey, I think this is my most talented roster yet, he may have been on to something. Like I said, for as much as Eli Drinkwitz likes to have fun and say some things in the media that make people smile and maybe raises their eyebrows every once in a while, when it comes to actually evaluating his own team, he tends to be pretty honest as far as I can tell. I don't think it's a real mystery of what Eli Drinkwitz thinks about this team. So that's something to keep in mind next offseason if you're trying to prognosticate, as I often am. And by the way, I did bring up Notre Dame, and one thing I thought was interesting, and Notre Dame, their AD mentioned that, hey, the only conference we've talked to here recently, the only commissioner I've talked to, well, that's Greg Sankey with the SEC. And I have to say that caused my eyebrows to go up just a little bit, because before it was announced that Oklahoma and Texas were joining the SEC, what was it, in 2022 or was it 23? I can't remember. 2-3 years ago when that happened, well, that kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it? It wasn't as though there was months and months of speculation on that particular topic. No, just one day it was announced, oh my God, Texas and Oklahoma are leaving the Big 12 and going to the SEC. That was a boss move, to say the least, by Greg Sankey. That was a take no prisoners type of move, and the type of move that really sent the Big Ten into, oh my God, we have to counter this mode. And they did a pretty good job countering it, I would say, as good as they possibly could have, getting Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA. But of course, I just think that, number one, you can't beat Oklahoma and Texas, especially with the actual geographic contiguousness. You know what I'm saying. You got a contiguous, that is the right word, right? Actual geographic thing there. Oklahoma and Texas, yes, they border SEC states. You're not flying all the way back and forth across the country like you are in the Big Ten. So that alone is a fantastic advantage that the SEC provided itself, in my opinion. One that'll be a long-term benefit for sure. Well, the only other real team out there that I think can provide value for really the Big Ten or the SEC for that matter is Notre Dame. And while Notre Dame, I think most people would agree that, hey, they probably fit more logistically and logically in the Big Ten, perhaps. I'm just telling you, Greg Sankey, once again, he is a take no prisoners type of guy. And while I don't really think that the SEC wants to expand any further, if there's a chance that Notre Dame wants to do it, I think the SEC would do it. I'm just telling you, I think they would. So, and again, close enough for government work. I know that's not a southern state, of course. Well, neither is Missouri really, but again, close enough for government work. I think the SEC would be just fine with it. And you know what? Speaking of Notre Dame, when I started thinking about, hey, what if we just could hit the reset button on college football? What if I were just the czar of college football and could essentially do whatever I want? Obviously, this is a wild hypothetical scenario, but this is the type of thing I think a lot of college football fans are talking about, because a lot of us are going, wait a second, what happened here? Who asked for all of this? Who asked for the USC to be in the Big Ten? Who asked for the Pac-12 to die? Certainly not your average college football fan. So I have to admit, in trying to make the perfect college football experience for myself, I've long been an advocate of the 8-team playoff. And I thought, you know what, if you could just divide college football up into 8 perfect conferences, then we could just get rid of all of this arguing. We could have 8 champions playing in a 1-8 playoff situation, and really we could end all of these silly figure skating type arguments that we have. Unfortunately, even when I went back to 8-team type of conferences as much as I could, like for example, go back to the old Big 8 with Missouri, Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Colorado, and go back to the old Pac-10, the old Big 10 even, before Penn State. Go back to the old SEC before they added Missouri and Texas A&M, and of course Texas and Oklahoma as well. And it all works out pretty good for the most part. In fact, the old Southwest Conference makes a reappearance, and even best, a new Big East Conference that I'm going to tell you about here in just a little bit that I think would be absolutely fabulous for college football. But unfortunately, once you get to that 8th conference, there just simply are not enough teams to make a viable 8th conference of FBS teams. You just can't have a major 8th conference. So it turns out, actually, we don't need to dial it back quite as far. We just need to go back to like 2010, basically. Go back to the old Big 12 and that type of era. But we also need to create a new Big East, which I'm telling you, this is my favorite idea I've ever had. And Notre Dame is a huge part of it. You're going to love it. Trust me. Stick with me here on the program for just a little bit longer. It's going to be worth it. I promise you. But first, I do got to tell you about Rougiette, because this is something most men don't bring up, but they absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night, and when it shows up at the worst possible moment, well, Rougiette Ready is designed to help you take the control back, because Rougiette Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Because it's not just a physical thing. Often it is a psychosomatic deal. Some guys can just get in their heads a little bit. So it's easy to understand why more than 150,000 men have already made the switch. And if you've been thinking about taking the next step, well, now is the time. Head to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. That is RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiette Ready, feel present, feel confident, feel ready. So I think I'll try to solve the rest of college football, including the CFP format, another day. But I do really think that I have solved the conferences and their alignment. Let's just realign the whole thing. Let's actually take a time machine and go back into 2010 for the most part. Back before Missouri left for the SEC, back before Nebraska left for the Big Ten. So let's just go back to the old Big 12. By the old Big 12, I mean the old Big 8 plus Texas, Texas Tech, Baylor, and who else am I forgetting? Texas Tech, Texas A&M, there we go, and Baylor. You remember the old Big 12. And we're also going to go back to the old SEC with 12 teams. So before the A&M and Missouri expansion. Hey, Arkansas and South Carolina, don't worry, you're safe. We're also going to go back to the Pac-12, but a slightly modified Pac-12. We're going to add Utah and BYU instead of Colorado, who is staying in the Big 12. The Big 10, you know what? The Big 10 is actually going to go, it's actually going to literally be the Big 10 again. What a concept, because we're going to move Penn State, who made, of course, the Big 10 have 11 teams at one point for a decade plus, I would say at least, because they're going to create a new Big East conference. Now, the fifth conference here, again, I'm creating 6 power conferences here, is going to be the ACC. We're going to have the original 8. Plus, I'm going to throw Syracuse and Louisville into that mix to make that a 10-team conference. Again, the minimum here, everybody's going to have at least 10 teams, but no more than 12. So these days of super enormous conferences are over. But listen to this Big East. Penn State, Virginia Tech, Boston College, Rutgers, Cincinnati, UCF, Miami, Pitt, and Notre Dame. Now, here's why this is important, and here's why I think Notre Dame fits fabulously in this conference. Number one, you've got a bunch of teams in the eastern part of the United States, some on the eastern seaboard like Rutgers and Pitt, for example. Hey, you got a lot of Notre Dame support from those areas of the country. Also, you've got Miami, Florida. Hey, how's the annual Catholics versus convicts game? How does that do your fancy? Frankly, this Big East Conference needs Notre Dame too. They need a power type of team to buoy it, along with Miami would be a good one too, but Penn State as well. To me, that's a competitive, that conference has pretty good competitive balance. And again, I'm going to read these again. Virginia Tech, Boston College, Notre Dame, Rutgers, Virginia Tech, Penn State, Cincinnati, UCF, Miami, and Pitt. So not only do we have BC and Notre Dame, by the way, they already have an annual rivalry and game that they play. But importantly here, we've got a beautiful triangle. We've got Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia. So you've got the backyard brawl. You've just got a great triangle of rivalries there that have gone on and off here with conference realignment. Now they're back every single year on an annual basis. Again, give me Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia. Give me that triangle. Give me Miami and Notre Dame playing every single season. And, of course, you've got Virginia Tech maybe back on the rise with James Franklin as well, and historically a really good program there. To me, that is an exciting Big East that I would love to see brought back into the fold. Is that going to happen? Of course it's not. But, hey, you asked me to put on the czar hat, or at least I gave it to myself. Either way, if I were in charge, that's how I would realign everything. Give me 6 power conferences, including this new Big East that, frankly, I am quite in love with. Well done, sir. Well done. But you know what? Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen today. And by the way, if you're a Spotify listener, you know Spotify Wrapped? Well, if Locked On Mizzou made your Spotify Wrapped, well, drop it. Just drop a screenshot. Tag it on any of our social media. Tag Locked On's national account, and they'll send you a code for a free month of the Everydayer Club. So you know what? Until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou.